Chapter 1. The Side Character Who Lived Too Kindly. Calix Thornwood had always been the type of reader who finished a novel in one sitting, eyes burning, heart racing, unable to stop until the last word had been consumed. AOB novels were his guilty pleasure. Worlds where alphas ruled with power, omegas shone with resilience, and fate itself bent around love, revenge, and awakening. So when his sister tossed a thick novel onto his bed and said, "You'll love this one. Gate awakenings, enigmas, revenge, everything you like." Calix didn't hesitate. He read it all in one night. And when he finally fell asleep, satisfied and smiling, he never woke up as Calix Thornwood again. Cold air brushed against his skin. The scent of pine, damp earth, and unfamiliar pheromones filled his lungs. Calix's eyes snapped open. Above him stretched a pale sky he didn't recognize, framed by towering trees and jagged cliffs. His body felt wrong, stronger, heavier, unfamiliar in ways that made his heart pound. No, don't tell me. The memories that flooded his mind weren't his own. A name surfaced. Vontino. A side character. A disposable alpha. Calix, now Vontino, sat up abruptly, breathing hard as realization settled like ice in his veins. He had transmigrated into the novel, not as the protagonist, not as the villain, but as a Vontino, a forgettable alpha who appeared briefly in the early chapters and disappeared after the Gate arc, only to later be mentioned as one of the rare alphas who differentiated into an enigma. In the original story, Vontino was nothing more than a name attached to a footnote of power. So this is my role. Once the shock passed, calm followed. Vontino made a decision. He would not interfere. He would live quietly, hide his talent, and wait for the plot to unfold exactly as it should. After all, he knew this story by heart. The world was approaching a monumental event. In 1 month, a phenomenon known simply as the Gate would appear. A three-dimensional space that descended upon the world without warning. Inside it, alphas, betas, and omegas would awaken supernatural abilities tied to their biology. Some would emerge stronger, some would die. And among alphas, a very rare few would differentiate into enigmas, beings that stood above the hierarchy itself. In the original novel, Vontino would enter the Gate and become one of those rare enigmas. But now, he chose otherwise. He suppressed himself, lived as an ordinary alpha, took no risks, drew no attention, because the story didn't belong to him. It belonged to them, the true protagonists. Vincent, the destined alpha top. The man who would rise from betrayal to absolute power. Vincent was born into an influential alpha family, a name that commanded respect even before his awakening. In the novel, he would awaken 3 extremely rare abilities after entering the Gate. Titan physique, a body that evolved beyond human limits, granting monstrous strength and regeneration. Predator's instinct, the ability to sense danger, lies, and killing, intent with terrifying accuracy. Dominion authority, an alpha pressure so overwhelming it could force submission from entire battlefields. And then there was Luther, the gentle Omega healer. Soft-spoken, resilient, unwavering. Luther would awaken the ability Divine Restoration, becoming the greatest healer the world had ever known, the only one capable of restoring damaged glands and stabilizing enigma bonds. Together, Vincent and Luther were destined to stand at the center of the new world. Love, power, revenge. Vontino waited for it eagerly, especially the revenge arc. According to the novel, Vincent's rise would begin with his fall. Before the Gate appeared, Vincent's own brother would orchestrate a brutal car accident. Vincent would survive, but at a devastating cost. 70% of his gland would be damaged. His legs would be crushed beyond immediate recovery. An alpha deemed broken was worthless. His family would abandon him without hesitation. They would erase his name, cut off his resources, and leave him to rot, believing he would die quietly before the Gate ever appeared. Vontino remembered those chapters vividly. Cold, cruel, infuriating, and yet necessary. Because from that betrayal, Vincent would eventually rise. Stronger, ruthless, untouchable, Fontino had been waiting patiently for that moment, until fate deviated. It happened on a fog-heavy morning. Fontino had been traveling through the outskirts of the mountain region, planning to return to the city before nightfall, when something stopped him. A scent. Faint. Metallic. Laced with pain and broken alpha pheromones. Someone's injured. He followed it instinctively, pushing past thorn bushes and jagged rocks, descending into a narrow valley hidden from the main paths. That was when he saw him. A man lay sprawled against the stone, blood dried dark against torn clothes. His breathing was shallow, uneven, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. His gland, visibly damaged. Fontino's heart dropped into his stomach. No way. Even unconscious, the man's presence was undeniable. Sharp features, broad shoulders, the remnants of dominance clinging stubbornly to his scent. Vincent, the protagonist, the man who should have been left here to suffer according to the plot. The man whose suffering would ignite the entire story. Fontino froze. This was the turning point. The moment where he was supposed to walk away. If he interfered now, the story would change. Luther might never meet Vincent. The gate arc could derail. Everything could collapse. Fontino clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. "I'm sorry," he whispered, forcing himself to turn away. One step, then another. A broken breath echoed behind him, weak, painful. Fontino stopped. His chest tightened. He turned back. Vincent's lashes fluttered, eyes barely open, unfocused, but alive. Abandoned. Left to die. Something inside Fontino cracked. Damn it. He moved before he could think. Fontino knelt beside Vincent, carefully lifting him despite the weight, despite the risk, despite knowing this single act could shatter the original plot beyond repair. "I'll just help you recover," he murmured, as if convincing himself. "After that, I'll disappear." He carried the future villain, hero, and king out of the valley, unaware that this single act of kindness would bind their fates forever, and that the story would never return to how it was written. Chapter 2. Toward a bond that was never meant to exist. The estate Fontino chose was small, by aristocratic standards, but unmistakably luxurious. Tucked deep within a forested mountain region far from the capital, it was a place meant for anonymity. White stone walls wrapped around the property, enchantments layered subtly into the gates to block scent tracking and surveillance. The interior was warm and refined, polished wooden floors, tall windows that welcomed soft sunlight, and a quiet that felt almost sacred. No one came here unless Fontino allowed it. For 2 full months, this estate became Vincent's entire world. Vincent's injuries had been severe. His gland damage had been deliberate, cruelly calculated to cripple an alpha's future. His legs, once strong, barely responded to his will. Even breathing had been painful in the early days. Fontino never complained. He rose before dawn each day, managing both his work and Vincent's recovery with careful precision. As a high-level strategic analyst for an intercontinental trade consortium, Fontino worked remotely. His position paid obscenely well, required absolute discretion, and allowed him to operate from anywhere in the world. It suited him perfectly. While encrypted meetings played quietly in his office, medical drones delivered supplies. Specialist equipment lined the guest room that had quietly become Vincent's bedroom. Fontino learned how to clean wounds without flinching, how to stabilize a damaged gland without triggering pheromonal backlash, how to support a grown alpha learning how to walk again without making him feel weak. "Slowly," Fontino said one afternoon, arm firm around Vincent's waist as they moved across the sunlit corridor. "I'm not made of glass," Vincent muttered, jaw clenched. "And yet," Fontino replied calmly, "you broke." Vincent laughed, short, surprised, genuine. It was the first time Fontino realized something was changing. Vincent watched him. Always. Not openly, not in a way that could be easily confronted. But in quiet moments when Fontino thought he wasn't looking, Vincent's gaze followed him like a tether. Too closely. Too intensely. Like hunger restrained by gratitude. like devotion forming without permission. At night, when the estate settled into silence, Vincent lay awake listening to Vontino's footsteps down the hall. He memorized the cadence of his breathing, the subtle shifts in his pheromones when he was tired, focused, irritated. This alpha smelled like safety, like home, like something Vincent had never been allowed to have. One evening, rain drummed softly against the windows. Vontino had just finished rebandaging Vincent's gland, his fingers steady despite the intimacy of the act. "You saved me," Vincent said suddenly. His hand shot out, fingers tightening around Vontino's sleeve. The grip wasn't forceful, but it was desperate. Vontino froze. "I did what anyone would," he replied gently, easing his sleeve free. "It was a lie. Anyone else would have walked away. Anyone else would have followed the plot. But Vontino had stayed. And that was the problem. Because the way Vincent looked at him in that moment, that look was supposed to belong to Luther, not him. Time passed too quickly. By the third month, Vincent could walk unassisted. His body, once broken, responded unnaturally well to recovery, as if something within him was waiting, dormant, preparing. Rumors spread like wildfire. The gate was coming. Markets destabilized. Noble families summoned heirs home. Military forces mobilized. Every Alpha, Beta, and Omega prepared themselves for awakening. Or death. Vontino panicked. This was where the plot was supposed to begin. Vincent should leave. Find Luther. Enter the gate as a wounded Alpha. Everything should realign. But instead, Vincent stayed. "You're acting strange," Vincent observed one morning watching Vontino pack. "I have work," Vontino replied too quickly. Vincent's eyes narrowed. Vontino left money. More than enough to last years. He left encrypted access to assets, properties, contacts, everything Vincent would need to reclaim his life. And finally, a letter. "You're strong enough to walk your own path now. Don't look for me. Live well." Then Vontino vanished. No farewell, no explanation. He severed all tracking trails, resigned from visible positions, and disappeared into the lower sectors of the capital under a false identity. He believed that once the gate appeared, fate would correct itself, that the world would snap back into its proper shape, that Vincent would forget him. In the secluded estate, Vincent stood alone, letter crushed in his hand. His pheromones surged violently. "He left," Vincent whispered. Something inside him twisted. Not grief, not sadness. Possession. "I won't forget," he said quietly. Outside, thunder rolled. And somewhere in the world, fate laughed. Because this bond was never meant to exist. And yet, it had already taken root. Sorry for interrupting the story for a moment. Just like Vontino's fate was rewritten, stories can be stolen too. This story belongs to Anastasia0_0, its original creator and YouTube channel of the same name. If you found this anywhere else, please know it isn't the original source. Now, back to Vontino and Vincent. Chapter 3. The gate opens and fate breaks. The gate descended upon the world exactly as the novel had promised. A Lee, an impossible rupture, tore through the sky, unfolding into a vast three-dimensional space layered with shifting light, fractured gravity, and runes that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Cities fell silent, kingdoms halted. Every Alpha, Beta, and Omega felt it calling them. The beginning of destiny. Inside the gate, the rules of the world were rewritten. Alphas awakened dormant bloodlines. Omegas evolved beyond fragility. Betas gained abilities that shattered their supposed mediocrity. And among the countless Alphas, a chosen few differentiated into enigmas, beings that stood above hierarchy, logic, and fate itself. Vontino entered the gate with calm acceptance. He already knew what would happen. In the original novel, this was where he became an enigma. But fate, once again, laughed at him. The gate swallowed Vontino whole. Time fractured. Pain tore through every vein in his body. Yet, there was no differentiation. No collapse, no rebirth. Instead, His alpha instincts sharpened to a terrifying extreme. The world around him bent. The space he stood in responded to his will. The moment he took a step forward, the terrain obeyed. A realization slammed into him. Territorial dominion. Not an enigma evolution, but something else entirely. A rare alpha ability so absolute it was rumored only in legends. Control over any space he acknowledged as his. Within his territory, Vontino was law. Vontino stared at his trembling hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. The gate released him days later. Changed, but not as written. 5 months passed. 5 months of chaos, power struggles, awakenings, and rewritten hierarchies. And 5 months before Vontino learned the most catastrophic truth of all. They met in the most absurd way possible. Vontino had been standing outside a high-end cafe in the capital's upper district, arguing with himself over whether spending that much money on coffee was a crime when a familiar scent crashed into him. Heavy, dominant, terrifyingly intimate. His territory flared instinctively. Someone stepped too close. A hand closed around his wrist. Firm. Possessive. Found you. Vontino looked up, and his soul nearly left his body. Vincent. Vincent stood before him, taller, broader, impossibly composed. His presence crushed the air around them. People nearby unconsciously stepped back, instincts screaming. An enigma. Vontino knew instantly. And worse, Vincent's gaze burned with singular focus. On him. You disappeared, Vincent said softly. His grip tightened. His smile did not reach his eyes. You made me fall in love with you, Vincent whispered, leaning in close enough that Vontino could smell power, wealth, obsession. Now take responsibility. Vontino short-circuited. No. The word burst out of him so fast even he looked shocked. Vincent blinked. No? No? Vontino gestured wildly. This is wrong. You're supposed to say that to Luther. The cafe went silent. A voice from behind them snorted. What? Vontino froze. Slowly, very slowly, he turned. There stood Luther. Omega, healer, protagonist bottom, holding 2 iced drinks, laughing so hard he nearly spilled both. Me, Luther wheezed. With him? Vincent sighed. Not this again. Luther doubled over. I'd rather drink expired suppressant. Vontino's brain imploded. They sat together minutes later, the situation escalating from catastrophic to outright ridiculous. So, Luther said cheerfully, slurping his drink, I helped him look for you. Vontino choked. You what? He wouldn't shut up, Luther shrugged. Kept saying my alpha. He smells like home. I'll break the world if he's dead. Normal stuff. That is not normal, Vontino croaked. Vincent didn't deny it. So you're not together? Vontino asked weakly. Luther gagged theatrically. You, no, that's my best friend, my buddy, my emotional support enigma. I am not emotional support, Vincent muttered. You cried when I left for 3 days. I was stressed. Vontino stared. The plot lay in ruins. Later, alone at last, Vincent spoke. He told Vontino everything. How the gate changed him. How he differentiated into an enigma, something never meant to happen. How Luther healed his gland fully. How together they dismantled his family, reclaimed his empire, and rose to power. And through all of it, Vincent said quietly, stepping closer, I was looking for you. Vontino backed up instinctively. His territorial dominion flared, walls creaked. Vincent smiled. You're stronger, he observed. Good. I can't, Vontino said desperately. This isn't right. You were meant to love Luther. Vincent's gaze darkened. I love you. Simple, absolute. Possessive. You entered my territory first, Vincent continued softly. You saved me. You stayed. You left. His hand brushed Vontino's waist. And now, he murmured, you're back in mine. Vontino swallowed. Fate had shattered. The gate had broken destiny. And standing before him was not the protagonist he knew, but an enigma who had rewritten the world, just to find him. Chapter 4. Obsession wears the face of devotion. Fontino watched the news reports in silence. One powerful alpha family bankrupt overnight. A board of directors arrested for treason-level corruption. Illegal assets seized. Bloodline rights revoked. It was precise. Cold. Efficient. Exactly as the novel had promised. Vincent had taken his revenge. His family fell. Corporations collapsed. Bloodlines burned until nothing remained but ash and empty titles. Fontino exhaled slowly. So the revenge arc stayed intact, he murmured. Vincent, standing far too close behind him, hummed in agreement. Of course, I don't break promises. Fontino stiffened. Promises. Right? Because unlike the original story, Vincent never once turned toward Luther with romantic intent. Instead, he turned toward Fontino. Vincent stalked him openly. No shame, no secrecy. Fontino said, "Give me time to think." Vincent heard, "Follow him everywhere like it's a full-time job." As the world's most powerful billionaire enigma, Vincent had the means to do exactly that. He appeared everywhere. At Fontino's workplace, entire floors mysteriously bought overnight. At business meetings, sitting calmly at the head seat despite not being on the agenda. At social events, hand resting possessively at Fontino's lower back, daring anyone to comment. "No one touches what's mine," Vincent said calmly to a noble alpha who smiled too long. The alpha paled and vanished. Fontino facepalmed. "I am thinking." "I'm helping," Vincent replied serenely. "This is harassment. This is courtship." From the sofa, Luther, now very comfortable in Vincent's properties, snorted. "He's being romantic. Try harder, Vin." Yes. Luther helped. Actively. Maliciously. He accidentally booked Fontino into Vincent-owned hotels. He reassigned seating so Vincent always sat beside Fontino. He leaked Fontino's preferences to Vincent like classified intelligence. "Stop encouraging him," Fontino hissed one afternoon. Luther grinned. "I support healthy obsession." "This is not healthy." Vincent nodded solemnly. "I can improve." "That was not a suggestion." Ironically, Vincent made things worse by being absurdly competent. Using his immense wealth and influence, he restructured entire industries post-Gate. When Fontino needed funding, protection, or access, Vincent provided it before he could ask. And when Luther mentioned wanting a stable research platform, Vincent simply acquired a medical conglomerate, then placed Luther as chief medical strategist. Fontino stared at the contract. "You can't just buy companies because you feel like it." Vincent tilted his head. "I can." "That's not reassuring." "I bought it for you." "That's worse." Luther clapped happily. "Best friend privileges." 5 months passed like this. 5 months of resistance. 5 months of stalking. 5 months of Vincent wearing devotion like armor. Until one night, Fontino finally broke. Exhausted, overwhelmed, and painfully aware that fate had long since derailed, he said quietly, "Fine, we'll try." Vincent froze, then smiled. And the very next morning, marriage contracts arrived. "What is this?" Fontino shouted. Vincent adjusted his cuffs calmly. "Our wedding schedule." "I said we'd date." "We are. This is a wedding." "Efficient dating." Luther leaned over the documents. "Wow, Enigma-level efficiency." The wedding happened before Fontino fully processed reality. Private, luxurious, absolute. Enigma authority sealed the vows. Territorial dominion answered in silent resonance. When Vincent kissed him, it wasn't forceful. It was reverent. That night, their consummation was slow and overwhelming, Vincent touching him like something sacred, whispering devotion against his skin, claiming him without pain or coercion. Somewhere between disbelief and surrender, Fontino realized he wasn't afraid. 2 months later, Reality struck back. Hard. Fontino stared at the medical report, then stared again, then screamed, "This is biologically impossible." Luther leaned over his shoulder, delighted. "Congratulations, you're pregnant." Vincent smiled like the universe had finally aligned. "I knew it." "I did not agree to this." "I did," Vincent said gently, pressing a kiss to Fontino's palm. "For both of us." Luther laughed until he cried, "Enigma speedrun, 2 months." "I will fire you," Fontino snapped. "You can't," Luther replied cheerfully. "My boss is your husband." Luxury became a cage wrapped in silk. Guards, doctors, a mansion bought and rebuilt solely to suit Fontino's comfort. Vincent hovered. Overprotective, attentive, obsessive. But he never hurt him, never forced him, never silenced him. He worshipped him, protected him, loved him with terrifying sincerity. And as Fontino lay awake one night, hand resting unconsciously over his stomach, he realized something chilling. The plot hadn't gone wrong. It had simply crowned a different king and chosen a different fate. Chapter 5. A Happy Ending. Written wrong. The world did not end. That, more than anything else, surprised everyone. After the chaos of the Gate, after awakenings, power struggles, and rewritten hierarchies, the world adapted. Laws were amended. New institutions rose. The Gate stabilized. No longer an unpredictable catastrophe, but a regulated phenomenon studied by researchers and guarded by international coalitions. And slowly, quietly, the original plot faded into legend. Luther was the first to step fully out of it. No longer defined as the protagonist's destined lover, he carved a path entirely his own. As the world's greatest healer, he revolutionized post-gate medicine, creating systems that could stabilize glands, treat awakening backlash, and even reduce enigma pheromonal overload. He laughed often, loved freely, and when asked about fate, he would grin and say, "Turns out I was meant to be a godfather, not a lover." Vincent did not argue. Fontino only smiled. Fontino's pregnancy was an experience. From the very beginning, Vincent treated it as a sacred event. Too sacred. Entire wings of the mansion were remodeled, lighting adjusted to Fontino's mood cycles, floors reinforced to respond gently to territorial dominion surges. Guards rotated in silent shifts. Doctors specialized in Enigma alpha pregnancies were flown in from across the world. Fontino, ruler of space itself, glared at all of it. "I am not fragile," he insisted. Vincent nodded seriously. "I know." Then added another security layer anyway. Luther moved in temporarily, appointed himself chief emotional support, and immediately began terrorizing Vincent. "He kicked," Luther announced one morning. Vincent was at Fontino's side in less than a second. "Are you in pain?" Fontino deadpanned. "No." Luther cackled. "Relax, Enigma. Babies kick. It's their hobby." As months passed, Fontino changed in ways that startled even himself. His territorial dominion softened, no longer sharp-edged, but expansive, protective. His space responded not just to his will, but to the tiny life growing inside him. The baby reacted to Vincent's presence, to his voice, to his pheromones. When Vincent spoke, the child calmed. When Vincent was gone too long, Fontino felt restless, territory yearning for its other ruler. It terrified him. It comforted him. It made him understand. The birth was controlled, precise, safe. Vincent never left his side, not for a second. When Fontino screamed, the world shook. When Vincent held his hand, space itself steadied. And when their child finally cried, Fontino wept. A son. Strong, healthy, already radiating potential. Vincent dropped to his knees beside the bed, forehead pressed to Fontino's hand, voice breaking for the first time since the gate. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me." Luther wiped his eyes dramatically. "I'm naming him. That's godfather privilege." "You are not," Fontino said weakly. I already did. Weeks later, once the world had settled into this new reality, Vincent did something unexpected. He proposed. Again. No audience, no contracts, no pressure. Just Vincent, kneeling in their private garden, ring held with reverence. I will never cage you, he said softly. But if you stay, I'll spend my life proving you chose right. Vontino looked at their child, cradled safely in Luther's arms, looked at the man who had rewritten fate itself, the enigma who ruled the world, the husband who had never once broken him. And he chose. I already did, Vontino replied. Their bond became legend, an alpha who ruled space itself, an enigma who ruled the world, territorial, possessive, unbreakable. Luther stood proudly as their child's godfather, teaching him medicine, mischief, and how to annoy his parents equally. And somewhere, far beyond gates and destinies, the original novel closed its final page. Because this story had become something far better. Not written, not destined, but chosen.